We continue the study of the Teriyag Mitzvot. We're up to Mitzvah number 175. And that is the Mitzvah of Tevillah in the Mikveh. If somebody is Tameh, it's a positive commandment. It's in Parashat Mansour. The Pasuk is V'rahatz et besaro b'mayim v'taher. It's Perek Yudalit Pasuk Tet. The Hachamim come and learn on this Pasuk. Mayim shekol besaro ole bahen. There has to be enough water that can actually cover the entire person's body. Hachamim then gave a shi'ur, which is 40 se'ah. 40 se'ah, at least according to the Chaim Na'eh, would equal 87.65 gallons. So that you need to have how much water in order to make the Mikveh Kishidi. Now, min Torah, the Torah does not forbid mayim she'uvin. That means from the Torah, you're allowed to take from a cup, draw the water, and pour it into the Mikveh, min Torah. However, the Hachamim came along and they were posel any Mikveh that's waters were drawn. Even if the waters flew naturally and landed in the keli and then overflowed from the keli into the Mikveh, since it went through a keli, therefore it's considered mayim she'uvim and it is pasul. Now it should be noted that there's another type of Mikveh that's called ma'ayan. Ma'ayan is a natural wellspring. There does not have to be 40 se'ah in the ma'ayan. As long as the water covers all his body when he goes in, even though there's not 40 se'ah in one place. Furthermore, when it comes to the laws of Mikveh, Harambam writes a very big hadush that you can't really call it a mitzvah or an obligation to go to the Mikveh. What does that mean? Let's say a person decides he wants to remain tameh, and therefore he'll be careful. He won't go into Mahaneh Shechinan, he won't go into the different places, and he wants to remain tameh. You can't say that he has to go to the Mikveh. All it means to say is if he wants to become tahor and enter the different zones, then he has to go to the Mikveh. But the chayuv itself, there cannot be. But then the Sefer Chinuch, in his golden language, says the following: Mikol makom en ze midat hasidim ve'anshe ma'aseh lihiyotam metumma'im betum'atam ki hatum'ah me'usa v'tahara ahuva. He says, but the hasidim, they don't want to keep tum'ah on themselves, and therefore they make sure to always try to go to the Mikveh whenever there's tum'ah in them, because he says tum'ah is me'usa, it's disgusting, and tahara, purity, is beloved. Now there's another halakha that says that all people that are teme'im can go to a Mikveh. Mikveh is where it's a pool of water, except one, and that's the zav. The zav, the Torah says, needs mayim hayim. He has to go actually to a wellspring. Now the Sefer Chinuch gets into some laws. Of course, this is not a halakha shi'ur. We're just discussing what the Sefer Chinuch writes. But he says, let's say a person went into the Mikveh with his clothes on, like a lady who's nidah. She went into the Mikveh with her clothes on. The Rab says, so long as her clothes are loose and the water technically can go through and permeate all her begadim, b'di'abad, such a tevillah is Kishidi. All tevillot are done during the day, except when it comes to a nidah that must be done at night, and a yoledet, a lady that gives birth. Min Torah, the Torah discusses hatzitzot. Hatzitzot are interferences on the body or interruptions between the water and the person's body. From the Torah, it's only asur if the hatzitzah is on the majority of his body and he's makpid. So the Torah is very lenient when it comes to hatzitzot. Rubo umakpid. However, the Hachamim came along and they said all hatzitzot are going to be a problem in Mikveh, even a hatzitzah of kol shehu. The only time a hatzitzah will not be a problem if it's mi'ut ve'eno makpid, which means it's on the small part of his body and he doesn't care that it's there. But anything outside of mi'ut and eno makpid is going to be a problem in the Tevillah. Now, we should discuss one issue, just so you know the terminologies. How do we make mikvaot kishidim today? Clearly, we're not just going to take a hole in the ground and wait until 40 se'ah of rainwater come in, and clearly that is an old way of making mikvah. Oh, we want to keep the water fresh, and we want to keep the water at a certain level. So there's two ways to make a mikveh. One is called the system of hazra'ah, and one is called the system of hashakah. Let's discuss clearly what these are. Hazra'ah means that we take a bore, like a pit, on the side of the mikveh. That's not the mikveh that you're going to dip in. This is the bore on the side. And we fill it up with 40 se'ah of pure rain mikveh water. Now you have a kosher mikveh. Once you have a kosher mikveh, we put the mikveh that you're going to dip into it next to it, and we put a hole in between. Now what happens? We start to fill up the mikveh that has the 40 se'ah. The halakha says once you add water to a mikveh that's kosher already, all the waters continue to become mikveh water. Hazra'ah, it's like you're planting the mikveh. You're putting more water in your kosher mikveh. Now what ends up happening? It starts to flow and overflow. The overflow goes through the hole. Now all that water that's going through the hole is all considered kasher mikveh water. So that's the system of hazra'ah. The other way of making the mikveh is very simple. You just take a pool on the side, a board, and you fill it up with 40 se'ah of kosher mikveh water, minimum. You can put more, and you make a hole, and now your regular water, which is tap water that you fill up the mikveh with, it's touching. And therefore, since it's touching, so therefore it's considered an extension of that mikveh. There's many mikvahot that are mahmir on both. They have one board of hashakah and one board of hazra'ah, because there's advantages and disadvantages of each system. So the mahmirim, they make sure to follow both systems. Nonetheless, the question is, what's the reason? Why does the Torah say that if you go to the mikveh, it brings you to tahara? Of course, it's a chok. However, the Chinuch gives two rational reasons why. The first reason he actually gave in the Mitzvah 173 that we learned a few days ago. And he said, because when a person comes out of the mikveh, he has to imagine that he's born fresh. Why? Because the mikveh reminds us of what the world looked like before man was created. If you remember, the Torah tells us in the beginning of Bereshit, the world was all full of water. And therefore, when a person goes into the mikveh, you're going back to the beginning of Maaseh Bereshit, when the world was all just filled with water. And therefore, when you come out, you're emerging from this early world to a new world. And therefore, just like you emerge from one world to the other, it motivates the person to remove his old ways and fix his averot. In this mitzvah, the Chinuch writes, Yesh remez b'tevillah sheyenakeh hatovel nafsho mikol chet. Cleanliness. Because usually when a person goes to a clean mikveh, the mikveh cleans the person physically, which means hygienically, the water cleans the body. So when a person comes out of mikveh and he's hygienically clean, it reminds him, now that you cleaned your body, why don't you start cleaning your soul and make the shuvah? That's the sword of the mikveh. Of course, the mitzvah applies, this mitzvah going to the mikveh, bechol makom, bechol zeman. It applies to male and female alike. And if a person, let's say, did not go to the mikveh, and he started to go to places where he's not supposed to, as a result, he is mevatel the mitzvah aseh. Odd palm, we say again, if a person is tameh and doesn't go to the mikveh, he didn't do avon. He wants to remain tameh. Good luck to him. But if he acted upon this tum'ah and he went to places where he's not supposed to be, now you did not follow the protocol of the Torah, and you were mevatel the mitzvah aseh of going to the mikveh when you want to enter the places of kedusha. B'zman hazeh, although there would not be an obligation to go to the mikveh, but the tzaddikim still go to the mikveh today. Harambam himself writes that he did not miss a tevillah for tefillah in order to prepare himself based on what we call tevillat Ezra, which we will discuss at another time.